All right. We are here with James Donnelly, who consistently gets 4.5 to 5 pounds per light. But before we get into any of that, let's find out about you, because you have a very interesting background. You grew up in Humboldt, and is this correct? Started growing cannabis when you were 12 years old with your father?
Yeah, I was actually born on a cannabis farm.
Born on a cannabis farm.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
What was that like?
It was, an interesting experience, especially back then, right?
I
It was
bet.
the outlaw days. Everything was pretty secretive as far
yeah.
as like who we were allowed to talk to about,
Yeah.
right? But yeah,
Like, what did your parents say to you? Like, okay, you can talk to this person, but you can't talk to that person. How did that? Because
A
it
little
really
bit.
was like a closed secret society up there. Yeah.
Essentially, I had to just tell everybody that my dad did construction, right? That was the message that we gave to people. But, my father was part of the Humboldt's Finest and the Calvet Meds group that operated
Okay.
20-something acres between, Humboldt County as well as Central California,
Okay.
Lockwood, Paso Robles area. My grandfather was the co-author
Down to
of...
Paso Robles. Oh, what's wine country?
Yeah, absolutely. My grandfather was the co-author of Sensimilia back in the 70s.
No way.
Yes, sir.
Sensimilia Tips? Mm-hmm. That came out of Bend, Oregon. Mm-hmm. That was Tom Alexander, if I remember right.
Yes,
I
sir.
can remember having conversations with Tom, and then that Operation Green Merchant stuff came, and they put the kibosh on Sensimilia Tips pretty quick.
So yeah, my father's father, Jim Donnelly, he was the co-author of that.
Really?
And, helped.
Very cool. Very
I
cool.
don't want to sound pretentious, but revolutionized seedless weed in California, right?
Yeah, Sensimilia Tips. Yeah,
exactly.
That's it.
Right.
That was it. So okay, so now you're growing up on a farm. You're a kid, and were you at what age were you first exposed to cannabis? Because at 12 you actually started growing, helping in the fields and doing stuff. So like between 0 and 12, what were you doing? What was the family like?
As early as I can remember, you know what
Really?
I mean? There's always a job, no matter what age. The earliest job was just filling pots all day long,
Sure,
for the production and whatnot.
Yeah.
The I guess biggest job that I had early on, I was probably 10 or so. Justin, my dad, was obviously over the hill running farms and whatnot. He would leave me in the trim house, right? And I would collect all the trimmers' pounds and weigh them up and tally it. And
You're
that was kind of
yeah, very good.
That was my first operation.
Very good.
Yeah.
And so you've been growing cannabis for 15 years. Is that right? That's accurate. You're 27.
27, yes, sir.
Oh, you're so young. So young with so much knowledge. And you consistently were getting 4.5 to 5 pounds.
With everything dialed in.
I know you dialed it. It took a while to get there.
100%. It's hard for people to believe, but yeah.
Yeah. And so let's talk about what does a grower have to do to dial in a strain? And were there particular strains that were able to get the 4.5 to 5 and some that weren't? So let's start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
How do you dial in a strain? How did you do it?
For me, 80 to 90% of it is really your environmentals. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Making sure that you have the perfect temperature and humidity at all times.
So what do you think? What is a perfect temperature and humidity at all times?
It's different for HPS versus LEDs,
Right.
different
That's right.
strain and whatnot. But I really like, 77 or so in veg. I like to hit like 81, 82 by week 3 or 4 flower. And then obviously bring it back down by, week 5 or 6.
Okay, so what's the humidity levels at this point?
I run lower humidity than most people with HPS.
Yeah.
I like our starter rooms like 58 to 58, 59 area. And I bring them down to 50 or so by week 3.
Okay.
I'm really at like 45, 47 area by week 6 or so.
Yeah.
Drier rooms, my plants are transpiring more, they're drinking more. And if they're drinking more, usually, they're bigger buds.
Yes. So what size? Okay, what was the density first? You're using LED HPS. You're able to get that 4.5, 5, or was that HPS?
Yeah.
Back then.
With Fellow, we were running HPS about 2 foot on center. We were doing 60 light rooms with essentially 370 plants per room or so. Very tight light spacing.
They're like six plants per light.
Give or take.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, it was, a Ferrari of a facility. The HVAC was integrated into our CO2 system. We did some
Was
somewhat
your CO2, did you burn natural gas or did you use CO2?
cold CO2. Yeah.
Cold CO2, okay.
Sir. We did some, interesting things with our CO2 that most people don't. We ramped up to numbers that most people would be uncomfortable with.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks think that a plant can't utilize more than 1,500 ppm is optimum. I've heard some guys like to run their CO2 at the same rate as they run their ppm for the nutrients. So what did you do?
I mean, we started at those levels, 11 to 1,300 or so, but
Okay.
we would slowly ramp up throughout flower.
Now, Alexa, so what week would you ramp up on?
So I would ramp up every single week, right? Each week I would go up about whatever 200 to 300 parts per million
Wait. You start with 1,000, and then every week you're ramping up.
until I get to about 2,800.
Wait a minute, that's a lot of CO2.
Absolutely.
So what'd you find out? What happened?
Well, we were pushing our light intensity pretty far, right?
Okay.
We were hitting 1,300 to 1,700 ppfd. And so
Okay.
the plants really needed that CO2 to handle that amount of light,
Yeah.
right? And that combination of, high intensity light with the CO2 to supplement it,
Yeah.
we had great success with that.
Great success. All right. And how did you prune your plants at all? Did you take the tops on top of them? What did you do? Or do you just let them grow natural? How big were they when you planted them? How tall were they at harvest?
Michigan has a hard plant count as opposed to in California where we have a square footage limit. So we really tried to maximize each plant, as much as possible.
Okay.
We were usually on a 2 topping process. I would
Okay.
top them once as
Sure.
they went into our 4x4 cocos,
Okay.
and then I would top them again as they went into our 2 gallons. Right, we hit great numbers, but they were big plants.
What strains were they?
We ran a Lion OG that was bred by Bobby Savino.
Okay.
Very good yielder,
Okay.
somewhat similar to old SFE or Platinum, something like
Yeah.
that. We were running a Sour Slushy, another strain bred by Bobby. We were
Okay.
running some classics, Ice Cream Cake. We worked with Seed Junkie, running their Lemon Cherry Gelato and their LA Pop Rocks.
And okay, great. So Seed Junkie, what were you able to get per light with Seed Junkie genetics and advanced nutrients because you ran advanced, right?
Yeah, 100%. We switched from front row to advanced,
Yep.
my second or third month there. And like I said, it took us a minute to really get dialed in with the system.
Mhm.
But once we did, it was off to the races. With the Seed Junkie genetics, not quite as much as the strains that Bobby had
Okay.
bred, probably 3.5 in our greenhouse and 4 to 4.5 in our indoor.
With Seed Junkie.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And then with the other genetics, you're able to hit 4.5 to 5.
Yeah, 3.5 to 4 in our greenhouse and 4.5 to 5 in our indoor. And it sounds like a lot. I know, people have a hard time believing it, but if you're really dialed in,
and I know that it's been confirmed by multiple people that yes, indeed, you are the 5-pound guy, and you can do it.
100%. You got to be really dialed in. You got to be on top of your game, and most importantly, you need to have a team of people who are really,
Now, let's talk about the team because the team is everything.
100%.
So when you're in a commercial facility, if your team isn't the right mix, the right culture, you're not going to get anywhere near what you should be getting. And in fact, you're probably not going to be profitable and you're going to go out of business.
100%.
So you're young and you're talking about culture already and team. What do you know at such a young age? Because when I was your age, I don't understand any of what you're talking about now. That came later on in life. So to talk about it. So what makes a great team?
My father, I got to give him a lot of credit. He taught me from a really young age, people management and how to really, motivate a team and take accountability. The big thing that he taught me.
Wait, you said a really important word. Take accountability.
100%. Right?
Okay.
So
your father taught you that.
Yes, sir.
Oh, very good for him.
So, the big thing that he would always emphasize to me is when, if you're going to be the guy, you're going to be the leader. When stuff goes right, you need to pass that credit along to your team.
That's right.
And when stuff goes wrong, it's nobody's fault than yourself, right?
It is because you made the decision.
Exactly.
You decide to put certain people on certain tasks,
Yep.
and you have to own it. I find one of the biggest challenges that people have is taking responsibility for their decisions and choices. And what they don't realize is it's all about them.
Yep.
If you're a leader, it's about you and
100%.
how you handle your team, and it starts at the top. And if you're having problems with your team, you should look at yourself really, really deeply, because there's something there that is getting in the way of that team being a top performing team. And when you look closely and you look inward at yourself and you start analyzing how you treat the people, how you talk to them, how you communicate, you may not even realize that you're putting a person down or making them resentful by the
100%.
words that you're using. So
Couldn't agree more. 100%. It's my father would always say, right, if something goes wrong, there's two possibilities. Either you didn't work with your team well enough and you didn't train them well enough, or there's something wrong with your own system and your process, right? If something goes wrong, you can't be like, oh, it's so-and-so's fault.
Right.
It just doesn't work in this industry.
Yeah, because there's something called internal locus of control and external locus of control. And external locus of control is what probably 90% of the world runs on. And that's blaming everyone and everything but themselves. Internal locus of control is where you are totally selfless and you just say, yeah, it's my responsibility. It was under my command, and I made a mistake. You're allowed to make mistakes in life, and self-reflect on that moment, and see where you made the misstep, and then learn from it, and don't do it again.
I was raised Buddhist, and so this...
You were raised Buddhist?
Yes, sir.
That's so interesting.
So this philosophy of, right, taking accountability, everything that happens to you and around you, it's a result of, you know, the way that you interact with people, the way you interact with the world, right? So I couldn't agree more.
And even in relationships, personal relationships with girlfriends, and you break up with them, what part did you play in that? What could you have done better? What could you have stepped up earlier and said, instead of being waiting and building up resentment, and then all of a sudden you got this passive aggressiveness rather than dealing with the subject matter right when it happens, taking the person away from everybody else into a quiet room and you don't raise your voice, you don't yell at them, you just ask them the questions to figure out, to understand how their thinking process led them to that decision, and then how can you correct that so it doesn't happen again, instead of lambasting everybody in front of the whole team and yelling. That doesn't work.
So important, right? If you want to give somebody credit, that's when you do it in front of the team and with an audience.
I can't believe you're 27 years old and you understand this. Yeah. You give
That's when you do it in front of an audience. When you want to, correct something, that's when you do it in private, and that,
you do the disciplining in private and the praising in public.
100%. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Building a team, right? If you want to be successful and hit 4 to 5 pounds of light, you got to have everybody pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
Right. And you got to be willing to learn and not have an ego on you.
Let's talk about ego.
Sure.
Because in our industry,
there's a lot of it.
There's a lot of egos. And I understand why. I mean, these guys had a superpower. They were able to go into a basement, put up lights, grow cannabis indoors, plants indoors, cannabis in particular, and make a lot of money. You were of the system, but not part of the system.
Right.
You had a lot of free agency when back in the traditional days. Now we don't have. Now there's rules to follow, labor laws, taxes you have to pay,
especially in California.
All of it, especially in California. We call it the sunshine tax. There's all these other things that you didn't have to do. And so back to the ego thing is, you have an ego because the average person could never go into a basement, string up the lights, and grow those plants. And you felt superior to other humans because you had this one superpower.
Right.
Well, now this superpower is mainstream. Welcome to reality. It's a whole new day in cannabis and a whole new way of growing and doing things.
It's a new age. And again, I got to
Yes.
give credit to the people that trained me, my uncle, my father, my grandfather. You know, in Humboldt, they would say if anybody calls himself a master grower, you get laughed right out the door, right? You're a master learner, if anything,
That's
master
right.
of adapting, master of, accepting change and
Let's get back
whatnot.
to this Buddhist thing. So
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
saying something that you're growing Buddhist and you learned a lot about these teachings in
Philosophy,
Buddhism
yeah.
philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. My grandmother, was a dancer for a living.
Okay.
She spent about 10 years in Switzerland and then about 5 or so years in Tibet.
Wow.
Funded some monasteries out there, came back. She built a Buddhist temple on our
What?
property in Big Sur. And
Really?
I lived in it for a couple years. So
Oh, okay. No, 27 years old, a lot of wisdom. That's one way of getting it. Yeah.
I'm, just always open to learning. That's my thing, right?
A lifelong learner.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, right? You can't think that you're a master of anything in this industry. There's so many different ways to grow weed. There's so many different styles. The way we did things in Humboldt is not the same as we did it in Salinas. What we did in Salinas is not the same as Paso Robles. Michigan is different than California.
And you're able to, no matter any of those states, you're able to pull that weight, 4.5 to 5 pounds of light.
Yeah, with a particular style, I think
Right.
that with LEDs hitting 3.5 to 4, you're really
Okay, so
crushing
let's
it.
talk. So LED, you're hitting 3.5 to 4. With HPS, you can go 4.5 to 5. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. In my experience, you can hit bigger numbers with HPS.
Why do you think that is?
Uh,
I've always had this thing about these LEDs. When they first came on, I don't know. Well, I can use it for my cuttings.
yeah,
I can use it to veg my mother's.
that's what we used to do.
And then now all of a sudden, they've gotten into the flowering component. They're understanding the, more about the lighting.
I think that LEDs have a potentially higher ceiling when it comes to the quality of the product. You're giving off a wider spectrum and whatnot.
So you think that the LEDs will give a higher quality product than the HPS?
A ceiling, right?
A
A
ceiling. What does
potential
that mean?
quality.
Potential. What does that mean? A lower floor.
A lower floor in the sense that LEDs are harder to dial in than HPS.
Okay.
Right? We have, 30, 40 years of experience working with HPS.
Mm-hmm.
These LEDs that are coming out today, how much experience do people really have dialing in these sort of systems?
Yeah.
Not a lot.
That's
right?
true. That's true. And you're going to see more genetics that are going to lean towards LED and away from HPS.
Yeah.
Because when the breeders were breeding for the plants, they were doing it under HPS. So everything was indoors, less leaf, HPS, more light through the canopy. And that's why the plants look the way that they do, because of 40 years of breeding has bred that kind of plant. Where I believe that you're going to see some very unique and different strains coming that are specifically tuned for LED. And LEDs now are also, we're seeing these tunable spectrums. Here's the thing. Only 1% of the sun's rays are visible to the human eye. Now, in a plant, I don't know what that percentage is, but it's a heck of a lot higher. There's frequencies of light that we're not even been looking at yet in our industry that we're going to find out. Well, look at the far red.
Yeah.
It goes through the canopy all the way. That we never knew that till probably about 3-4 years ago.
I was about to say, a couple years ago at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Everyone's got their style. I've, grown with LEDs and, you can have really good success. Just as far as like a yield perspective, from my observation, obviously HPS it's a higher leaf surface temperature. I can run my room at lower humidity. If I'm running my room at lower humidity, I can feed the plant more. If I'm feeding the plant more, I'm going to swell more and have bigger buds.
Okay.
And, some of it is just, stylistic though, right? I grew up growing mixed light HPS, so that's something.
You did mixed light. My first grow was mixed light HPS.
Yeah.
I had on the outside 12 1,000 watt lights. There was 4 in the middle that were HPS, and on the outside we had metal halides.
I mean, we grew up doing hoop houses at first and outdoor,
Really?
obviously. But we were, I don't want to say one of the first, but early on we were running HPS in our mixed light greenhouse.
Okay.
And as you, I'm sure, are aware, the pounds coming out of those facilities, it was tough to tell them apart from indoor a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And we're obviously growing them at a significantly lower price than what people were, cost
That's
production
right.
for their
And
indoor.
there's some guys today growing light depth. You cannot tell the difference between light
100%.
depth and indoor.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys in Humboldt who still, pass on their, mixed light hoop houses as indoor, and the quality, is
You
on par, if not better.
This is what makes me crazy. Exactly what you said. There is so many great strains that are growing outdoors
Mm-hmm.
and people just say, well, it's outdoor, it's worth less. I think that over time you're going to find out that there's sun growing is going to, in fact, I know there's sun growing right now that outperforms indoor.
I really agree with you. I think that we're starting to see from like a consumer level kind of a shift too. I think that people are kind of starting to gravitate more towards, right, living
Quality.
soil, sun grown, organic, right?
Yeah.
You can tell a pack that was grown with, Athena salts from a mile away.
Really? How come?
It looks great. The look is there. The nose is not what it should be, right? We would always, early on when, we talked about switching from our old compost teas and whatnot to salts, the argument was, hey, salts are always going to out yield our organics, but the nose and the quality is just not there.
So one of the reasons why organics was very hard to yield really well with them, and people did, they call it synganics, or a mixture of mineral and organics.
Sure.
That's because in organics, it is the bioavailability of the micronutrients.
Mm-hmm.
Advanced Nutrients fixed that a long, long time ago.
Yep.
We were able to find a chelate that met OMRI certification and OIM certification and is immediately bioavailable to the plant. And that is the magic of our organics over everyone else. Not only do we have the ratios right, macros, micros, and secondaries, however, we have chelation technology, because most of the time when you're growing organic, some of this stuff breaks down in months and years.
Yep, slow release.
The plant is getting different ratios of micronutrients, and it affects the outcome, the yield, and the quality because of that.
100%. And it's kind of why I've gravitated towards your guys' products in the last couple of years, right? Growing up, using compost teas, using living soil and whatnot.
And there's one other thing, and that is the membrane walls on a trichome head. If you look at our competitors, they have, first of all, their trichome heads are usually a little bit misshapen. They're not nice, round, symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see the different kinds of cannabinoids and terpenes that are in there. It's because they have a very thin membrane wall in the trichome head.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it doesn't hold aroma. So the bag appeal is there maybe for a week and a half, and then it disappears.
Mm-hmm.
But even that being what it is, there's something that's even worse, and that's you lose 1 to 3% of your weight through volatilization because of that thin trichome membrane head. And that's something that we figured out a long time ago at Advanced Nutrients. Is like the trichome head matters a lot.
Yep, 100%.
And it's a lot of times, unfortunately, you see these new companies coming out. They think that, oh, it's just fertilizer and fertilizer's fertilizer. Furthest thing from the truth when it comes to cannabis, especially when you start talking about the biostimulants, additives, supplements, whatever you want to call them, then that takes the plant to a whole new level.
100%. You need to hit those specific needs in those specific weeks, right? And again, that's kind of why I've gravitated towards your guys' products, especially the Cultivator series that you guys released
Thank you.
A year or so ago. It's a night and day difference for us, right? The nose of the weed, the quality of the weed, it's not even really comparable.
And so you ran other brands. You don't have to say the names.
Yeah.
But just all the other competitors out
For
there,
sure.
you ran.
Yeah.
And you've decided that Advanced Nutrients is, you were on Advanced Nutrients, and like every other grower, yeah, you should try other people's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not delivering the goods, it's not delivering the goods.
And to be, totally fair,
And then you came back to Advanced. Great, thank you.
100%, right? Growing up in Humboldt and whatnot, we obviously Advanced was out of our price point. It, didn't make
Sure.
sense for us.
Yeah.
But in today's world, with what you guys are doing the Cultivator series for, I mean, it was a no-brainer. And again, I'll go back to like the floor versus ceiling thing a little bit.
Okay.
I think that, to be 100% fair, Advanced, your Cultivator series may have a lower floor than something like Athena, because
Okay.
Athena, their whole trust the program mentality,
Okay.
you'll hit good numbers trusting the program. Will the quality be what you want it to be? It depends what your standards are. For me, Advanced has the highest ceiling, right? The highest potential, because you guys have more inputs, there's more micronutrients, and so the potential, right? And so the potential quality of the product is just, it's much higher than the other brands from my experience.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So what else should if people want to get that weight, like from the time that you take the cuttings, how big are the cuttings? How big do you get the cuttings, and how tall are they when you transplant them, and when do you go from the cocoa puck, let's say, into the 2-gallon pot, or do you use rock wool to take your cuttings and I put the rock wool thing into the cocoa?
So we were doing rock wool plugs into a 4x4 cocoa,
Sure.
and then the 4x4 cocoa into the 2-gallon. The big thing for us that we saw in order to hit those numbers was to never have those roots air prune themselves, right? So the rock.
Also explain that to everyone. So
Yes.
what does that mean?
So if you leave a rock wool clone, in that tray too long, the roots are going to start to air prune themselves, and they're essentially dying in that tray, right? So you need to be on top of getting that, rock wool clone into the 4x4.
As soon as that rock wool, the roots are hitting that rock wool cube, and you can see them, that's when you should transplant.
As long as they're white and fuzzy.
White and fuzzy,
yeah, 100%. Yeah. And same thing, with the 4x4 going into the 2-gallon, right? If you wait too long on that process, you've slowed down.
Same thing.
100%, same thing. And to hit those numbers, it's got to be damn near perfect, right? You need to be.
So what does the outside of the cube look like? Like you're like when it's a 4-inch and you're going into that 2-gallon pot, are the roots just on the barely on the outside of the cube? They're going down. They're a little bit is coming out of the bottom.
They're exploding out.
Because there's a lot of home growers out there too.
Yeah. Especially in Michigan, there's a huge home grow culture.
Yep.
They're exploding out the bottom, but it's early enough to where they're not browning.
They're not browning. They're nice and beautiful white,
fuzzy, and not to give you guys too much credit, but those voodoo tabs that you guys produce, it was a game changer for us. It was
for the entire industry. It is, and here's why: because diseases are held in the vascular bundle of the plant. Most of them, hopslate and viroid is held in the roots, right? But majority of people don't even realize that their plants have diseases, and only when the conditions are right in the environment for those diseases to spread, they do it. Again, it's the nutrients. No. It's the environment. That has 100%. A lot to do with it.
100%. Couldn't agree more. At this point, in our industry, I basically make the assumption that it has some sort of disease, hop latent or tobacco mosaic, whatever it may be. And, stressors will bring that stuff out of the plant, right?
Yes, they do. And there's a lot of diseases, Pythium, Fusarium, Phytophthoria, Rhizoctonia. They're all held in the vascular bundle, and they pop out. So what do the voodoo tabs do? It suppresses them. It holds them back. Yep. And that will usually can result from 25 to 75% increase in yield, depending on how diseased your plants are.
Which makes sense, right? I mean, we were hitting good numbers before we switched over to Advanced and Voodoo tabs, right? They were hitting 2.5 in their greenhouse and 3.2 in their indoor.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you're able to increase that by 20 to 40% by making small tweaks here and there, then it's not unrealistic. I mean, we could have hit higher numbers, right?
And it also has a root mass expander in there as well to expand the roots. But the biggest thing is, I think the biggest benefit is the protection. And you're right, they are a game changer.
Huge game changer. Yeah. Super easy to use. My irrigation guys loved me switching us over to those. Yeah, it's super easy to use, super effective. The price point it
Price
makes
point's
sense.
great.
Totally.
Yeah, we wanted to make it at a really affordable price point because we understood that diseases are is a big issue that's holding a lot of people back from their full potential that they could be getting in today's marketplace. That is extremely important. Dollars matter.
100%, man. And I really like what you guys are doing, with your products, trying to kind of bring back the craft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're scaling, we're getting big, everyone's blowing it up huge, but who's feeling that niche of, craft quality
Well,
cannabis, right?
we're only after that top 30% of the marketplace
Right.
that's looking for the premium premium cannabis because
Mhm.
that's what we do best. We grow premium cannabis.
100%.
Now, if you want us to custom blend something for you, we'll be more than happy to white label something for you as well because we have the capabilities of doing that in house.
Right.
That's at your own
Discretion.
risk. Yeah, at your own risk. And I see, we see a lot of times agronomists, it's like, we got an agronomist, we got it all under control. Man, I got to tell you, agronomists are great. They're really smart. Once they start working with the plant for a while, they really understand and dial it in.
Mhm.
But in the beginning, they don't have any idea. They're going to resort to some other kind of a formulation,
Right.
and they're going to try, and they're going to take their best shot. But I always tell the Dr. El Saholi story. University of Mississippi had the only license to grow cannabis in America, and they had a team of agronomists put together a fertilizer for cannabis.
Mhm.
And then one day I got a call from him. This is Dr. El Saholi. Hey, how are you? I knew who he was. They were talking to him. Right? Pretty cool. How you doing? He goes, yeah, we heard that you're, this is 2003, by the way. We heard that you're making products just for cannabis. That's right. Could you send us some? Okay, I'm more than happy to. What's your address? We did, and, they still use Advanced to this day.
Oh, wow.
We increased their CBD by 55%, THC by 41%, biomass 21%, seed production by 29%.
Wow.
And that was our third generation. Now we're on our eighth generation. That's coming out.
And you're releasing a new one pretty soon here, right?
SB1, yeah. I can't. We're 818. You're going to be one of the first to get your hands on.
I'm excited.
It's already at scale in some facilities that have been kind enough to say, okay, bring it in. I mean, we already know it works. We already tested it in smaller gardens, and first in the lab, then in smaller gardens, and then at full scale. And we're at full scale now, and we're getting ready to put that product out soon.
I talked to Corey the other day about it.
Oh, yeah, Corey, great guy.
He brought me some product that was grown with the SB1.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, I know.
Amazing looking product.
Yeah.
The nose is, reminds me of what we were doing back in the day with compost teas and organic soil, right?
Yeah. It really unlocks the plant, and we have the whole. By the way, the whole 8th generation platform. There is nothing that is replicated from our 7th generation. It is all brand new technology that our industry hasn't seen. Wait till we bring out. We have a product called Bigger Buds.
Yeah,
it's the replacement for Big Buds.
Okay,
and it blows the doors off of Big Buds.
Really?
Yeah, it does.
That's saying a lot.
It's called Bigger Buds. Yeah. And then we have a product called LXR that's coming out that you use all the way through veg and flower. I would love to tell you the secret behind that one because it's just. I will just say this: it opens the doors of the plant's ability to absorb nutrients at an accelerated rate.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's pretty cool technology. It took 3 years to develop this new platform. We are already working on our 9th generation, and I'm not going to tell you what we're doing, but it will blow people's minds. Absolutely going to blow people's minds.
I'm excited to see it. Like you said, I'm at 818 now.
So how do you like it? 818. It's great facility. What they got? 4,500 lights, and they're building another. What, 1,500 lights?
It's a Ferrari of a facility. 4,500 lights out in the desert of Adelanto.
Yeah.
All LEDs. We just switched over from Rockwell over to Cocoa.
Great. Great
just
move.
switched over from Trollmaster over to GrowLink. And
Okay.
our A3 building, we just switched over from Athena to Advanced.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I'm there to kind of, lead the charge with that.
But they have 200 people there, right? I heard 200,
Something like
200
that.
cultivators.
Yeah, something like that.
How do you handle all those cultivators? Like, how do you break that down? How do you do all that?
It's kind of like we talked about earlier, right? It's about building a team where everybody's pulling in the right direction and is happy to be there and, wants the company to succeed because we want our employees to succeed, right? It's a symbiotic relationship, or it should be,
Yeah, it must be a symbiotic relationship. Yeah.
100%.
There should be no clashes between cultivators and management, and that's the biggest thing that's going on in our industry right now is the clash of cultures, I call it. And slowly the ones who are adapting and who are flexible and can make the pivot are doing extremely well. However, those of the ones who are stuck in the old ways and resentful that they have to work in a facility and no longer work for themselves, they're not going to make it. They're just not going to make it.
If you're stubborn and you're not willing to pivot and be agile, I mean, you're not going to survive in this industry. We're in agriculture ultimately, right? And being able to adjust to different issues that you're seeing, not just from, a plant science perspective, but from a people management perspective.
People management. Let's talk about Buddhism, your father, your grandmother. What do they teach about people and putting together teams of people?
Man, again, like you touched on it, pretty well yourself. It's really about making sure that people, want to be there, that they feel that, they're involved in the decision making.
They feel safe.
They feel safe, that they're happy. Nobody wants to, work for somebody who's running around and barking at you and threatening to fire people. Like, it doesn't work in our industry anymore. You got away with it, like you said, back in the day.
Because of that type of person, that the way that they grew up, their family environment was conducive to that kind of those kind of activities, and it just seemed normal to them.
Right.
What they didn't understand, it's not normal.
No, not in normal society.
I had to learn it.
Right.
I went through that.
Yeah.
I was 1983. I started growing cannabis. Did my thing. Moved weight, so to speak, and it was much, much different then. And I had to make that pivot as a human. And I can remember it was a process. I was going through. I've always been one for self growth, but really to find out about yourself and how you are actually the person that affects the rest of the team in a profound way that you don't even realize. Once I understood that, the game changed.
Yeah, man, you said it well yourself, right? You got to be, introspective. You got to be able to look yourself in the mirror. And it's something that I, try to get better at every day. Everybody has their moments where they get frustrated, they get upset.
We sure do. Yeah.
But you got to be able to,
also
understand
when you're wrong, to say, listen, I'm sorry.
I was wrong.
I apologize for what I did and lay out what you did, and that won't happen again.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's, I got to give credit to the people who trained me because they really guided me away from, that sort of thinking and really, but, a good.
So so here you're young.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you see places where management is just putting people through hell. And even at a young age, when did you realize, man, I'm glad I'm not working for this team. I'm glad I'm working for my dad over here and this. I mean, how and when were you able to discern the difference?
I mean, I'm sure, as you know, there's a lot of guys in Humboldt, especially back in the day, who had massive egos, right? And
They still do today.
That's fair, for sure. But there was two philosophies with it, right? There was the guys who were, we're never going to call ourselves master growers. We're going to laugh you out the door when people say that.
Yep.
And there's guys still to this day who refer to themselves as master growers. Maybe you're a master in that particular style, but there's a million different ways to do it. There's a million different styles. So being a master learner, that's, my get down.
So there's a great distinction. Don't call yourself a master grower. Call yourself a master learner.
That's what I like to say.
So how can you tell if a guy's going to work out or not on your team?
For me, it's about putting people in a position to succeed, right?
Okay.
My grandpa would always say something like, "You don't want to ask a fish to climb a tree," right? So if somebody's not particularly successful in a, you know, specific role,
Hmm.
maybe you didn't put them in a role that's best suited to their skill set. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
you made a misstep.
And then again, it goes back to looking yourself in the mirror and being like, "Hey, did I put this person in the best position to be successful, or did I put them in a position where
You
that's
set
not
them
their
up for
skill set?"
failure instead of
Yeah,
success.
a lot of the time you have people who are really good with motivating teams and keeping people on task, but not good from an irrigation, environmental, plant science perspective. And then you got guys that are super knowledgeable from a plant science perspective who can't communicate effectively with their team, right? So if you're gonna, ask somebody who's good from a plant science perspective to manage a large group of people, you're setting them up to fail.
Hmm.
And from the other end, yeah, if you're gonna ask somebody who's good at managing people to run your irrigation and your environmentals,
Hmm.
that's not gonna work either, right?
So you have to kind of figure out the skill set of that person, put the right person in the right seat in the bus, as they say.
I think so.
What's the most people that biggest team that you ever ran?
Yeah, probably about 200 or so.
200 people.
Yeah.
And you kept them all like one cohesive unit, all pulling on the same end of the rope.
I would like to think so. I mean, we definitely
Well,
as
you're hitting 4.5, 5 pounds of light.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody has their moments, right? There's always conflict on farms.
sure.
It's still agriculture at the end of the day. We're not, as corporate as someone like Cresco or whatnot. But yeah,
Well,
I would.
what do you, how do you, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Let's talk about the corporate
yeah,
cannabis folks versus the
old school.
traditional guys
Yeah.
and growing. What's the biggest mistake that you see the corporate people making?
Not understanding that you're still growing a plant, you know what I mean? Trying to just treat it like a production facility, like a warehouse or something like that, like you're producing,
Hmm. Yeah.
avocados or something like that. And from, the traditional market, those guys kind of fall behind in the sense that our margins aren't what they used to be anymore. So
No,
there's no
here,
room to make
no,
mistakes,
no,
right? You
right.
have to be super efficient. You got to, be on point with all of your processes.
Hmm.
Your touch points have to be low, or your cost of production has to be a quarter of what it was back in the day, right? So for me, it's about finding a balance between those two things. Kind of like my philosophy with everything in life is nuance, right? I don't want to be as corporate as, not to call them out, but someone like
Right.
Cresco, and I don't want to be, as loose as, an old school guy smoking joints up on the hill in Humboldt, right?
So you're saying that there's a compromise between the two, and that compromise is a sweet spot, and the corporate guys and some of the traditional people aren't understanding that.
I would say so. I mean,
What do you think that if you were to give advice to and you're 27, but you're very, very knowledgeable and very wise for your age.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. What would you tell the corporate folks who are listening? Because corporate folks listen to this show. Uh, what's the mistakes you see that they make, other than the fact that some of it is they just think it's a plant. I'll tell a story real quick. I have a
Yeah,
buddy
yeah.
called Tom. He's unfortunately passed away, but we grew the exact same plant from the same cutting from the same mother,
Hmm.
and I would get $1,000 more per pound than he would. And he goes, "It's a fucking weed. Well, how come you get a I said, That's the
That's the
mistake. It's
problem.
not a fucking weed. You have to treat it with tender, loving care."
Hmm.
That's from my perspective. What's your perspective?
No, I have
Do
a
you see
very
the
similar
corporate guys
perspective for
very
sure.
similar?
I mean, like, we've talked about it a little bit. You can hit really good numbers doing things in the corporate way. And if you're big enough, you can be successful with
Yep.
that, right? Because you're just pushing tons and tons of weight.
Hmm.
But, for me, I'm more long term concerned about that, top 20 to 30% of the market, right? The
Yeah.
craft cannabis. And I feel, from my perspective, those are the guys that are going to be around long term. Otherwise, you're just racing to the bottom.
I keep saying that the best brands are yet to come out
Hmm.
into the marketplace, and you'll find some of those best brands will probably come out of the Emerald Triangle.
I think so. Yeah.
There's legacy growers there that have been doing this for 30, 40 years, multi-generational.
Yep.
They really got their shit together. And it seems to me like they're trying to, because of the past, they're trying to collapse Humboldt,
Mm-hmm.
like squeeze these guys out.
Yep.
No, you should be up there talking to the folks and helping them build the next global brand out of Humboldt. Humboldt County is exactly like Napa Valley and France put together.
I agree completely.
It's there. The strains are that good, and the outdoor sativas that are growing up in Humboldt. Everybody's into this indica thing, and they want to get couch locked.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember smoking some Hawaiian Snow. That was sativa dominant.
Mm-hmm.
I just laughed my ass off, and it was just a really fun, happy, uplifting feeling,
Mm-hmm.
outcome. Today, I smoke cannabis, go to sleep.
Right.
I go, buy me the indica, give me the couch lock, take a couple bong rips, and adios.
Right.
I'm going to sleep. And I really think there will be a resurgence of outdoor, especially sativa. And when people understand the differences of quality, it's the same thing. Beer has different quality,
Mm-hmm.
whiskey has different quality, vodka has different quality, and so does cannabis.
And we're just catching up to that, it seems like.
I think that the marketplace is getting more educated
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely understanding that more and more. Just like anything, quality does matter.
100%, man. And you touched on it. There's so much knowledge. There's so much experience with the guys up in Humboldt and the Emerald Triangle. I'm on the phone with them constantly. Right?
Really?
I'm very confident in my abilities, but I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. Right. So when I have a question, I have a contact book full of people who've been doing this for generations and generations.
So the answer is one phone call away.
100%,
That's
right?
right.
And if it's not, one perspective, it's a couple phone calls away, right? Get a couple people's different perspective and, find a nuanced solution somewhere in the middle, right? So
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, right? I think that, the brands that are going to be successful long term are people who are hyper fixated on quality above everything else.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while to get there. It's sad to see what's happened to Garberville and Humboldt in the last 5 and 6 years, but I think
You
we'll
think
see
there'll be a
resurgence.
resurgence, though, that it'll come back and people will realize sun growing? Because you got like Ridgeline,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing
He's doing
extremely
good,
well.
right?
Lance, yeah, he's crushing it.
I think so.
He's got his own brand out there
Yeah.
now, which it's like great, good for you.
He's
got
making some of the
Lance.
coolest genetics,
Yeah.
I think, that are out there on the market.
Yeah.
I think that,
Yeah,
guys in Humboldt.
burners there all the time.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. I think
And they grow organically with advanced.
that,
All the difference in the world.
you can make an argument that his quality is right up there with the highest quality weed on the entire planet. And I think there's a lot of guys up in Humboldt that, have, a similar quality. What he's doing with genetics is just badass.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool to see. I think,
it is.
some of the strains that he's releasing are going to be huge in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Jason Gilman, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. So if someone's growing under LED and they want to get weight, what should they do? What medium should they use? Explain it step by step. And then we're going to go HPS because I really want people to walk away understanding that 4.5 to 5 pounds per light is absolutely doable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not some bullshit.
Right.
It's not some hyperbole. It's reality.
Yeah.
I see guys pushing 3.5 pounds a light already on the candy strains.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start.
Yeah.
If they're growing under LED, start to finish, to get that 4.5, 5 pounds of light. Explain it step by step as best you can.
Yeah, for sure. For me, obviously with LEDs, right, you need to go in at higher temperatures. You need to go in at higher humidity levels. So you're probably talking, 82 degrees to start.
What's the leaf surface temperature you're looking at?
I would like to see it like 84 at least.
84,
something like
okay.
that. You're running higher EC levels. You got to take that with a grain of
So
salt.
So what number?
So I mean, right, Athena recommends running close to 3.0.
Okay.
I think that something like Advanced, they're a bit more potent, especially if you're using
What-
something like Power Up. So I
Yeah.
think, running a little bit lower EC, sets you up in a little bit better spot.
we do. We're and not just Athena, but just a lot of the other brands is that we are highly absorbable because of the chelation technology that we use. We've got that down pat,
Right.
and and the ratios. And you're right. You don't have to use a higher EC with Advanced. You use a lower EC, so your cost per gallon is actually less. Go ahead. So you're running 2.5 versus 3.
Yeah, I would run 2.5, 2.7 area.
Okay.
Higher temperatures, higher humidity. You can do it in rock wool or cocoa. I
Okay.
prefer cocoa for scale just because it's more forgiving.
Yeah, because there's something called cation exchange capacity, and cocoa has that, where rock wool has like 0,
Right.
and dirt has got the highest CEC,
Mm-hmm.
and so that cocoa is more forgiving because of the organic structure and not the sterile structure of the rock wool.
Right. And cocoa, right, I don't think that it particularly wants to be steered quite aggressively. Botanicaire's released some studies recently
Okay.
kind of making the argument that cocoa wants more of a, like you call it like a Humboldt style feeding, right? Full saturation and then really, really good dry back. So
what do you do to get that 4.5? Like, what do you do?
I meet somewhere in the middle, kind of like
So what does
everything,
that
right?
look like?
So I don't steer it super hard. I'll do, 4 to 6 feeds per day, bigger shots, somewhat close together. So it's somewhat similar to like a flood system like we would do in Humboldt, flooding our
Okay.
beds.
Sure.
But it's not quite that. It's, in the middle between, steering, you might be sending fucking 16 shots a day, super small intervals, small shots. In Humboldt, we were
So what is
flooding
your
our
shot
bed.
size?
It depends. In Michigan with Fellow, our shot size range from 3.5 to 5 minutes, and we would do 4 to 7 of them a day.
Okay.
And we had
And then what kind of emitters were they? What size emitters were you using?
the 3 mil Netaflex Netafilms.
Okay.
Again, for me, it's always about somewhere in the middle. I think that the knowledge accumulated in Humboldt, we gotta can't just disregard that. And people obviously have been crop steering tomatoes and other agriculture for generations and generations.
Yep.
So you can't just ignore that either, right? But the cannabis is not tomatoes, it's not other crops. So for me, finding somewhere in the middle between those two styles is really where we've been successful.
Okay. Keep going. So now, like okay, you're raising your clones. How do you raise your clones? Well, what's the EC level there? What are you using? What's the humidity level? How do you do all that?
So, I mean, I was actually taught cloning through Sage Koenig, who's an old school Humboldt guy who his father was also a legacy cultivator. So
cool.
one of the best growers I've ever met. I like to use Oasis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an old school
Those
system.
styrofoam kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Sage taught me a system of weighing our trays on scales, essentially.
Really? Explain that. That's very interesting.
So we know from day 1 to whatever day that they're rooted and out of there exactly what the water weight should be to the gram in those trays. So days 1 through 3, we'd start them at 3,200 grams. Days 3 through 10, you'd be at 2,700 grams.
Okay.
And then 10 plus, you'd be at 2,300 grams. Right. And it just eliminated the human error when we're trying to scale. And,
And you did something very smart. You gave them less water.
Yeah.
And the reason why you want to give them less water is you want those roots to have to work hard to find the water to expand.
Searching.
Because if you give them too much moisture, they'll sit there and they'll just suck that moisture, and they're not interested. They don't have to put out much roots. But when you take you're taking that water away, you're forcing them to have to look for water, and you get better rooting. All right. So now we've got the roots are going.
Yeah.
Say those weights again.
3,200 grams is the starting weight.
Yeah.
2,700 is your middle weight, and 2,300 is your final weight.
Okay.
I don't know. Sage will get mad at me for sharing them, but that's all right.
Sage, thank you, Sage. We're all about educating the cultivators, leveling up through education and best in class products. That's what we're all about.
He'll forgive me.
So thank you, Sage. And okay, so then they're rooted well, and now they're ready to go into the 4-inch cubes. What do you do to the 4-inch cubes? How do you set those up?
I mean, we've had good success with the compressed 4x4s.
Yeah, a lot of people use those because.
I like Rio Coco because it's, you know, a bit more
Okay.
husk, and so they dry out a bit quicker.
Okay.
And, you know, more aeration and, you know, searching for water more.
So what's the EC when you're in that 4-inch cube and you're putting in that Oasis plug?
I like to do like a 1.3 to 1.5 in my clone room. I do like a 1.8 to 2.2 as a 4x4. And then as that 4x4 goes into a 2-gallon, I'm running like a 2.2 and then ramp my way up to about a 2.6 or so.
And how long is that ramp up period? How many weeks, days is that?
I mean, I like to do it slowly, and a lot of this is strain by strain. I'm a big believer in like not having one set system.
I agree with you there.
You know, putting
I
your
agree,
eyes
but let's just give a kind of a window.
I would say right around week 3 for the most part. I really ramp it up. By week 3, I should be at least at like a 2.4.
Okay, all right.
And by week 6, I should be at that like 2.6 area.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, starting with clones, we went over the system. There is tested, proven through generations and generations. Mom health is, you know, one severely overlooked thing, I think, in our industry.
Let's talk about how long do you keep your moms before you switch them out?
You know, back in the day, we used to put our moms in big, you know, fucking 50-gallon pots and keep them forever.
That's right.
Nowadays, I really don't like to cut off of my moms more than twice.
Really?
Cut off.
I've heard a lot of growers saying that they take there's a few times they take cuttings and then they replace them.
I think that was one of the big, you know, changes that we made with Fellow that, you know, got us to the numbers that we were at. Was, you know, we were keeping.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think, you know, like we talked about earlier, every plant, I make the assumption, comes in with some sort of virus or issue, you know what I mean? And the longer you keep a plant around, just the more likely, statistically, that you're going to stress the plant out to bring something out of it. Right?
When you're taking cuttings, you're stressing the plant
100%,
for sure. Absolutely,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So again, it was a big change that we made. It's a bit more work for our propagation team.
Listen, I want to just stop right there.
Yeah.
A bit more work. People are always trying to figure out how they can do less and less work.
Yeah.
And I understand efficiency is important, but I'm not talking about efficiency here. I'm talking about laziness.
Yeah.
They just don't want to put in the effort. That team member doesn't want to do the extra step or the extra thing that has to be done. And I can remember talking to this guy who built race cars. And I said, yeah, just put a big horsepower motor in there. He goes, whoa, wait, Mike, you don't understand. It's all got to, like, it's not just the engine. It's building that. When you get that horsepower, what are you going to do with it? Well, now you got to use like a Muncie Rock Crusher transmission. You got to put a different drivetrain through, different rear end, different types of axles to take it all. So it's exactly the same thing. You have to do these little things. It's not one magical thing that's going to make it easy. It's doing a whole bunch of little things correctly that are going to give you the end result that you're looking for.
100%. And I get it. Our margins are tight in our industry today, right? There's not room to be inefficient. And so I understand the argument, but it's still cannabis. You're still growing a plant ultimately. And so putting in that, you know, little extra.
Well, think about a little bit extra, 2.5 pounds to 4.5 pounds. You know what kind of money extra that facility is making?
Yeah, it makes up for it
bank,
in the end.
Making bank compared, because you decided that it's important to do 6 extra steps. Now, maybe as a cultivator, you don't like doing that, but as management, they're going to appreciate the very fact that you're looking out for the house. You have to protect the house. If you're going into a facility and you're thinking about yourself, you don't belong there.
Right.
When you go into a facility, you have to be thinking about what's best for the business.
100%. My dad would always say something to the effect of, you know, too many people out here are trying to save a penny and end up spending $1, right? And, you know,
it happens all the time.
For sure. You spend a little bit more in the beginning, but if your overall quality and your yield is higher at the end, that's the only thing that matters, really, is what does it cost you to produce that pound versus what you're selling it for. If I can sell my pounds for at a higher price and I have more of them, then, yeah, my margins are there.
They're there. All right. So we're back now. We're talking LEDs, right? We're
Yeah.
still on LEDs.
Yeah, not for sure. We get
Okay.
sidetracked a minute.
So then, so you're week 6. What do you do then? You start dropping your EC
I like to ramp back down right around week 7 or so. It depends if you're on an
at
8
night?
or 9 week cycle.
Okay.
But
Yes.
if you're on a
Yeah.
9 week cycle, then I think right around week 7 you should drop it back down to 2.2 to 2.0 range, something
Okay.
like that. I really like to. This is something I guess somewhat unique that we do. We get really granular with how we cut our nitrogen late in flower.
Explain that.
So, I mean, we are at, probably a 70-30 ratio when it comes to our base to our bloom, so our nitrogen to our phosphorus, potassium. We get it to about an 80-20 by week 3, so 4 parts to 1. And
Okay.
then by, that week 7 or so, I'm at 100 to 0. So I cut all
100. Okay. Go ahead.
100%, bloom, so my potassium phosphorus, and I have 0 base in that mix at all, so 0 nitrogen. I'm really trying to suck the nitrogen out of the plants,
Right.
and get them to finish off correctly the way that we did, back
Okay.
in the day.
So from week 7 to week 9, explain how you do that again.
So yeah, right around week 7, we go to our 100-0 mix, essentially, all
Okay.
potassium, all phosphorus, lower EC levels.
Yep.
0 nitrogen in there whatsoever. I don't want any CalMag in there. I don't want anything that's going to add any extra nitrogen.
Right.
I'm really trying to, by my harvest, my plants shouldn't be dark green at that point, right? I should
That's
be
correct.
pulling the nitrogen out of my leaves
Yeah.
into the buds, helping them get more dense, swell up.
By the way, those leaves are energy sinks
Mm-hmm.
that the plant uses and takes from for the buds.
Mm-hmm. I find that all these salt lines, to be honest, like,
Mhm.
Athena's Core, for example, is a 1400.
Mm-hmm.
People are harvesting and it's dark green on day of chop, right? Like, when did we cut our nitrogen? When did we, pull it out of the plant? The buds are big, but they're balloons. They're
Right.
big and they're fluffy and they don't really have much
What
density or
about
weight to them.
the other brands that are out there too?
I think
don't
it's
want to sound
similar.
like we're just picking on
Yeah,
Athena
no, I
because
think the Jax has a similar issue.
yeah, Jax
I
has
think
that issue. Front Row Ag has the
Front
issue.
Row has that issue as
Yeah.
well, for sure. I think Front Row is a good product, but
Yeah,
similar issue for sure.
Yeah.
I think all salt lines for the most part have it, and unless you're willing to be in the room and get granular with that sort of thing, if you're just trusting the program, yeah, you're never going to be able to do something.
What do you
like
think
that.
about the guys who mix their own?
They do that in Europe and Switzerland, and I think that if you are comfortable with it,
And they do it here too, by the
Yeah,
way. And they
yeah.
do it up in Humboldt.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough one for me. I have mixed feelings about it. I think that from a cost perspective,
I don't think that they really calculate the cost of what it really costs to do it.
it costs
It-
more to make it, or it costs
it-
less to make it, but your overall cost might be more because you make a mistake. And
Yeah.
you're fucked. Right?
I always tell people when they bring up the price of our competitors, it's what's your reputation worth?
Mm-hmm. No, it's huge.
It's huge.
massive.
Do you feel good? It's funny. A lot of strange people's human behavior. The lead cultivators grow with advanced nutrients at home.
Mm-hmm. And then they use a different brand.
Yeah. And it's like I'm scratching my head because our cost per run is competitive with everyone else. In fact, most of the time we come in under the competitor's price
Yeah.
because during COVID we expanded our production capabilities, and so now we have economies of scale that we didn't have before,
Mm-hmm.
and our pricing is just incredible compared to what it used to be. As you mentioned
For
before,
sure.
Humboldt couldn't use it because it was so expensive, and it
Mhm.
was. And so now we've
Yeah, we couldn't justify it back in the day. We
Yeah.
always knew that it was a good product, but just the price point didn't make sense. When I first got out to Michigan, I called LJ and, wanted to get his thought.
LJ.
Yeah. I've known LJ for years. Me and him
Yeah.
lived together on a farm for a while.
Really.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me you guys lived on a farm together.
Well, he was there a couple days a week, but
Really? Okay.
LJ was kind of part of the group that bought out one of my family farms in Salinas.
Oh, that's right. He went up there for a while doing
Yeah.
cuttings and stuff.
So the new group asked me to stay on, and they brought on LJ, I think, to kind of make sure that I knew what I was doing. But me and him became really good friends through that process.
LJ's wickedly smart.
He's like family to me at this point, right? Super smart guy, and I'm picking his brain constantly when it comes to issues that we're seeing, arise in the farm.
Okay, so now you're using straight base all the way to harvest. How do you harvest your plants? What do you do?
As far as our process of chopping and whatnot?
Yeah, sure, and curing and all that.
I mean, our process of chopping is, pretty industry standard. It's what everybody else is doing. As far as my curing process, again, I go back to craft, right? I want a slow dry. So I don't want to get it out in 7 to 10 days. I want my dry to be 14 to 17 days.
Okay, 14 to 70 days. Do you pump in humidity in the beginning and then start taking it? What's humidity?
I mean, I like to start it at whatever, 63 degrees and 60% humidity.
Okay.
And then I like to bring the humidity down to about 50 by day 7 or so.
Okay.
But real cool, drop the temperature down to 60% degrees, 60 degrees, 50 or so percent humidity by day 7. And, you got to be in there. It depends on your
Sure, no, I get it,
whatnot.
right.
But just making sure that it's a slow cure, that's huge. Because if you dry it too fast, not only did you lose quality, but you lost a lot of the weight as well.
Yeah, you do. Volatilization.
100%.
That's right.
Yeah.
So nice, slow draw. Okay, so now we know how you cure it.
Mm-hmm.
And do you use the curved the scissors when you're? How do you trim? Is it a machine, hand trim, a machine first trim with then hand finished? How do you do it?
I mean, it's been different in each operation that I've worked at. I really am a big fan of hand trimming again because I'm hyper fixated on quality above else. As far as scissors, I'm old school. I like the Chickamaugas.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've run twisters with 818. We have a Mobius. We do primarily hand trimming, but some machine trimming for our B material essentially. But yeah, big fan of hand trim only.
All right. So now we talked about LEDs. Let's talk about HPSs.
Sure.
So how do you start the plants? What's the EC? What are any of the variances between what you just told us and LED and growing with an HPS?
I mean, the only real difference is, again, lower ambient temperatures in my room because my HPS are giving off so much heat.
Your leaf surface temperature.
My leaf surface temperature actually is higher with HPS than they are with LEDs.
Well, what is it usually?
I mean, probably 85 or so.
85, okay.
I find that I can run that CO2 a bit higher and run higher PPFD.
That's what
light intensity.
I forgot to ask you about the CO2.
Yeah.
The LED. So let's go back to that for a second. How high are you running the CO2? And during that flowering period, what are you doing with the CO2?
Again, I like to ramp, you know what I mean? I like to start at that, 11 to 1300 range, and I like to bring it up 200 parts per million or so every week until I hit 1800, 1900, something like that. With HPS, I'm running higher PPFD, higher light intensity, and so I'll get my CO2 to 25 to 2700 parts per million.
Really? Have you ever tried using less CO2 and you're not getting the weight, you're not getting the quality?
The quality's there, the weight is not there, right? For me, I try to not overcomplicate it. In my understanding, the more CO2 I have, in my experience is more CO2 I have, the more light my plants can absorb. The more lights my plants can absorb, the more nutrients they can absorb. And the more nutrients they can absorb, the better my weight's going to be.
Some people have said that they can grow weight but not quality, or they grow quality but not weight. You're doing both.
That's the goal for sure. I'm hyper fixated on quality, but in today's industry, you need to be pulling weight. You're not going to be successful if you're not.
Yeah.
So again, the ramping of the CO2, a lot of people are like, that's too much, right?
Yeah.
Plants
Most people will say 2,700. If I heard that, and I didn't know that you're growing 5 pounds of light, 4.5, 5 pounds of light, I would say,
too much.
He's spending a lot of money on CO2.
CO2, in my opinion, right, if you're increasing your yield, it's a pretty cheap input in the grand scheme of things. And, it's an interesting one because the plants will tell you if it's too much CO2. If you're in the room every day.
How does a plant tell you if it's too much CO2?
Visually, if you're in there enough.
Okay, what does it look like?
It's somewhat similar to like an overwatered plant.
You get the rams
A
horny?
little bit, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, not quite as
So you want them
drastic.
praying up?
Yep.
And you want them, but and at a 2,700 ppm, are they still going to be praying up, or they're going to have a little bit of a ram's horning?
So if I went from 1,300 to 2,700 overnight,
Yeah,
they would all be fucking horning for sure.
that's it. Really?
But if I can ramp that up slowly, and then
Slowly.
I'm in there every day visually watching it, and I'm adjusting my light intensity to account for that higher CO2 level, then the plants stay praying, they stay happy, and they stay bulking.
Wow. Okay. So with HPS, it's just higher leaf surface temperature. How about the ramping up of the CO2? Same strategy?
Same strategy. I just hit higher numbers by whatever week 6, week 7 of flower. With that high light intensity, I find that they need that additional CO2. If you're bleaching, your CO2 is probably not high enough.
Now that's interesting because you hear about, oh, the PPFD is too high, I'm bleaching the tops. You're saying, no, yeah, if that's happening, try cranking up your CO2.
Yeah.
And watch what happens. So what happens when you do that? Because this is the first I've heard of this.
You can avoid
that the white topping can be controlled with higher CO2.
100% for sure. The more CO2 I have in there, and there's a limit to it, obviously. I don't want to hit 5,000 parts per million. Well, but more CO2, my plants can uptake more light.
Have you done more than 2,700?
We've had instances. It was a closed loop system with Fellow, right? So our CO2 would not evacuate. It would not escape the room. Right. So we had instances where they would hit 35, 4,000 parts per million. And, they don't react as well to that. You can see the visual CO2 sickness happening. But yeah, it's a nuanced thing. I know people are not super used to it. They hear those numbers and they think it's too much.
They think it's bullshit.
Yeah, totally.
It's not.
If you're in there every day and you're watching it, you can totally get away with it. It's a fine line that you need to play running, 1,300 to 1,700 ppfd. People are going to say, oh, it's way too much light, right? But if my plants are reacting well to it, more light, I can feed them more. If I'm feeding them more, they're bulking better.
What's the biggest mistake growers make that you see in facilities, commercial facilities?
I think it goes back to just like trying to run one set system for their entire operation, right? Each plant is different, each room is different, and thinking that you can just do a generalized one size fits all. I very fundamentally disagree with that, right? That philosophy.
I agree.
I really want to be in the rooms, watching the plants, seeing how they're reacting to the little tweaks that I'm making, and be agile, be nimble in my decision making. I'm not married to a system, right? My opinion, as far as my growing style, it changes every day. You know what I mean?
Okay, very, very, very interesting. So, when you're looking at the different strains, how many times will you have to grow that strain to say, all right, I finally have it dialed in?
Depends how much you're in the room. You know what I mean? I think that at minimum, it requires 2 runs, really, to really master a strain. Okay. Sometimes more.
For me, it was always 3.
Yeah.
Like 3 is my magic number.
Yeah.
I don't know in my head or what.
The more the better, right? The more runs you have with a
Yeah.
particular strain, the more you become accustomed to it. My family grew SFV-OG primarily for most of my life. So that's a strain, the Lion OG in particular.
Okay.
Us hitting 4.5 to 5 pounds of light with that strain, I was like, we could do better than that, honestly, because the strain
what do you think the upper limit is per light?
It depends on your light spacing, how big your plants are. If your plants are huge, there's no reason you couldn't hit 6. You know what I mean?
There was guys, I think it was 5, 6 years ago, I went up into Truckee.
Yeah.
And they were doing 4 pounds of light.
I believe it.
But they were like 6 footers. They were trees.
No, our plants were 6 foot for sure. They're big plants.
So when you're growing, and so let's talk about the height of the plant.
No, big plants, man. They were 6, honestly, sometimes 7 foot plants. We had really high
indoors.
Really high ceilings. I consistently would raise my my HPS up as we got later into our flowering stage, but they were big plants. I weren't growing 3, 4 foot plants hitting 4 or 5 pounds of light. They were big babies.
So when you put the cuttings in, how tall were the cuttings?
Cuttings are pretty standard, 8 inches or so.
8 inches.
Yeah.
You don't put them in and put them in as teens or something.
Oh, so yeah, the clones were 8 inches. We go into a 4x4. At
Yeah.
that stage, you're probably 16 inches.
Okay.
By the time I went into flower, they're probably 24, 28 inches, something like that.
And you just let them grow.
I'm a big fan of, there's a big debate, right? Generative versus vegetative steering and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
If you go by like the Athena playbook, for instance, they want you to get generative day one of flower. Growing up in Humboldt, I'm not a fan of that personally.
Okay, why?
Well, I think that you're sacrificing your stretch. You know what I mean? I think you're sacrificing size if you do that. You end up with a bunch of short, squat plants, big buds, but your overall yield not what it could have been. If I can stay vegetative for that first 7 to 10 days,
Mm-hmm.
my stretch is just immensely, better overall. Bigger
Right.
plants, bigger
How's
buds.
the internodal spacing?
You got to be careful with that for sure, because they can get a little too wide. If you go into day 17, day 20, and you're still doing vegetative, yeah, you're going to be growing more stem than bud, right? So it's a nuanced approach, right? You got to be in the room. Sometimes it's day 5, sometimes it's day 10, or anywhere in the middle. But when I feel I'm 25% into my stretch, then I'll get generative. Then I'll get really aggressive with my drive.
25% into your stretch.
So, roughly.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
Stressors, right? Moving plants into a new room, into a new environment, uppotting them, it's already a stressful process. Mm-hmm. It's already a stressful event. I personally don't believe in adding another stressor and really, really aggressive drybacks at that same time.
Dryback is a stressor.
For sure.
And the plants respond to that stress because they think it's the end of their life and they want to get going.
Mm-hmm. Right. So they'll start flowering the size that they are, essentially. It'll stretch a little bit, but if you get too aggressive, you end up with some really, really short squat plants. Yeah. So yeah, we would, stay vegetative for about a week, 10 days or so, and then we would get generative and get really aggressive with our drybacks.
Okay. What do you think the future of cannabis is going to be?
Future of cannabis? I mean,
the way that you see it, where it's going, where it's at.
I think that, there's going to be two sorts of people who are going to be successful. There's guys like, Cresco, Green Thumb, Glass House that are big enough that they can just scale and scale and scale, and their cost of production is going to be so low that, they're going to fill that mid part of the market as far as quality.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be guys who are, probably a little bit smaller, but are hyper fixated on quality. And, I think that they're going to fill that, whatever 20 to 30% niche right there at the top.
So which type of sensors do you use? Do you use sensors?
So with 818, we just switched over to GrowLink, which is a very cool system. I've used Priva and Link 4 and systems like that in the past, but I got to say, I think GrowLink system...
Priva's a tough one.
Yeah, it definitely is a tough one. I like it, but I think that...
it's the Rolls Royce of growing. Priva, then it's Argus, right?
Right.
They've been around the longest anyways.
I think that with what GrowLink's doing with their AI co-pilot system is somewhat revolutionary for our industry. I was, hesitant at first. I'm like, I don't want an AI helping me run my irrigation. Like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But if you train that AI and you're putting in the correct targets and you're teaching it as you're growing, it can be a really handy tool for growing, craft quality at scale, right? With 818 4,500 lights, I can't, get as hands-on with each individual plant as you would in Humboldt, for instance.
Sure.
But the GrowLink system enables me to really have a bird's eye view and, have a good understanding of what's going on inside my media at all times.
Okay. Do you do any de-leafing, and how much do you do, and when do you do it?
Yeah, I like to, do a good skirt, honestly, like right as I go into flower, right? So I'm not as aggressive as some people with the lollipopping that they do.
Correct.
Again, nuanced, right? Guys in Humboldt would just let the plant do its thing and grow on its own.
Yep.
New school growers are lollipopping really, really aggressively. I try to find somewhere in the middle.
Out the energy sinks that the plant's going to use in flowering.
Yeah, you're taking away the solar panels. You're taking away all your potential buds, your node sites. So I try to somewhere in the middle. I want a clean under canopy so that, if you're spraying anything, you have good penetration, you have good light penetration, I got good air movement, but I want to leave as much as I can on the plant because, you know, solar panels is how it grows, right?
That's right. What do you think about under canopy lighting? It's the big craze right now. That's people are talking about it. Have you tried it? You know, friends who have.
I have friends who are running it with, you know, pretty good success. I haven't really done much of it myself, but to me, it makes sense. It depends on your style again, though, right? If you're lollypopping really, really aggressively and you have some short, squat plants, you probably don't need under canopy lighting.
Yeah.
But if you're growing bigger plants like we were doing, and you know you don't have great light penetration, then yeah, for sure, I think that it can help your yield pretty significantly.
It's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years to see about how under canopy lighting develops and what the spectrum that they're going to use and how that's all going to play out.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm interested to see. I mean, you know, I feel grateful every day to still be able to, you know, be in the industry and keeping my family legacy alive. So it's been a journey.
And your parents, they're still up in Humboldt, all that.
My dad's retired, living in Costa Rica. So
Good.
Yeah, good for him.
Good for him. And he's enjoying his life, I'm sure, as well. He should.
Yeah, absolutely. He worked hard. He, you know, did the years. He deserves.
Being a farmer is hard work. People think, oh, you cannabis growers, you just make so much fast money. Yeah, go out there with a shovel and dig a huge hole, and then bring in the bales of sunshine or premix or whatever your concoction is that you made.
Yeah.
And then fill that hole and all the work that goes in there.
No, it's hot. It's humid.
Tough.
It's, you know.
And you got helicopters overhead chasing your ass around.
Oh my God. Yeah. Our place got raided a lot when I was a kid, apparently, from what my parents told me.
They always say when you planted outdoors, one for the thieves, one for the police, and one for you. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it worked out some of the years I remember. It's like, damn, that was it. Is there anything that you'd like, James, that you'd like to explain to growers out there to get the high yields, to get the high potency, any kind of tips that you'd like to give? I mean, you've been a wealth of information.
Thank you,
far.
man. No, I appreciate it. For me, again, it's just about treating the plant like a plant. You know what I mean? Ultimately, as much as we want to be efficient, we want to be productive, it's not traditional ag. We want to take tips and tricks from traditional ag.
Yes.
But it's not, right? Cannabis is its own beast, and you need to treat it as such, right?
Yeah.
So that's my only thing.
It's genetically superior plant in the plant world.
100%, especially with what we've done with cannabis in the last, 20, 30 years, right? Our THC numbers are ballooned up from what they were when I was a kid.
That's right.
The plant is, finicky. It needs certain things at certain stages. Your specific needs of cannabis are much different than the specific needs of tomatoes or something like that, right? So realizing that and, being a farmer first is really the name of the game for me.
All right. Very, very good. James, it was great having you on this show. I wish you massive success at 818 and every other place or any place that you go. You're 27 years old. You're one of the wisest interview people, guests that we've had so far. So it was a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you
for your time and coming down here and sharing your insights into how to grow quality and quantity.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was great being here. Thank you for having me. And, we're going to blow 818 up with Advance and be producing some really high quality product here pretty soon.
Looking forward to it.
I've got some nice rooms
going up there and looking at your work, by the way.
I've got some rooms coming down that we're on Advance from start to finish.
Yeah.
And the quality is, to be frank, night and day versus what I saw when I showed up there. Really high quality stuff.
I'm glad to hear that because the group of investors, I know who they are. They're all really good people.
Absolutely.
Rami, especially, close to him.
He's a legend.
And yeah, he's a great human being. You got David who runs the place. You got David who's the owner there, and then you got Yaniv, and they're all great people. So
100%.
Thank you for being on today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.